Welcome to Motorsports Unlimited, Part 9.
Hi, Bill Wildt with you again. Welcome to Part 9 in our series, Motorsports Unlimited. Today we are going to talk about Chicagoland Motorsport Facilities, or, more specifically, Raceway Park. Helping me today are two of our caderettes, Subi Lundberg and Christine Schutz. Our guest today is the voice of Raceway Park, Wayne Adams Sr. Welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thank you, Bill. It's a real pleasure to be here.
All right, Wayne, we asked you up here today to talk about Raceway Park, but before we do that, we'd like to find out a little bit about you, if it's all right.
Okay.
Okay, first, I think it's proper to ask how old you are.
I'm 67.
You're 67,
Right.
and you're married?
Yes, I've been married 44 years last week.
Is that right? Well, congratulations.
Thank
That really is something. I only made it 14 years. Do you have children?
We have 4 children. My wife is Boots, and we have children. We have Wayne Jr., who is... I better not shoot at these ages because I always get on.
Oh, no, we've got to have the ages, Wayne.
Wayne Jr. is, I know he's going to be 43. He's the oldest. And then we have 2 girls. We have Darlene, and we have Jill. And then we have our young bonus baby that arrived not too long ago. He's only 23, and his name is Craig.
How about grandchildren? With that age as the youngest, you must have some grandchildren?
We have 4 grandchildren. We have Carrie and Chip. That's Wayne Jr.'s children. And then we have Kimmy and Amy. They are the children of my oldest daughter, Darlene.
All right, now there's one more missing, isn't there?
No, we just have 4 grandchildren.
Okay, all right. I thought I was trying to see if you had it right. Where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in St. Joseph, Missouri.
Right.
And I left St. Joseph when I was 17 years old and came to Chicago. And I've been in Chicago ever since.
At what age?
At 17.
At 17, so you came here more or less seek your fortune as a young man, and
That's true. I was told at that time that if you couldn't make a living in Chicago, you couldn't make it anywhere.
well, that's
Right.
still true, except nobody can make a living here either now. When did you, well, maybe I'm preceding this. I have to presume that somebody that's been in motorsport as long as you are, as long as you have been, and I should tell the audience that, yes, you're the voice of Raceway Park, but you've been to Raceway Park for how many years?
I've been announcing at Raceway for 40 years.
And you've been there how long?
I've been involved at Raceway for 48 years.
Right. In other words, the track opened in 1938, or was built in 1938. You were there while they were building it.
I did not see the construction. No, at the time they were building it, I didn't know about it. But I found out about it when the first race was scheduled, and that was in September of 1938. And I was at, I've forgotten exactly how many races they ran that year, Bill, but I think it was either 2 or 3 that they ran in 1938 to end of the season in September.
What did you, just because you like racing, or?
Well, when I first came to Chicago in 1936, in the winter of 36, I was living about 2 blocks from the 124th Field Artillery Armory at 54th and Cottage.
All right.
And they were running midgets indoors during the winter.
In the armory?
Every week, right.
All right.
In the armory. And for some unknown reason, and I can't tell you why, I always had a love for auto racing, although I had never seen a race in my life up to that point.
But you felt attracted to it?
I was attracted to it, always had been, since I was a child. And I didn't even know what auto racing was, except once in a while you'd read in the papers about the Indianapolis 500. That's about the only thing you ever saw in the newspapers.
All right, now the question is obvious. Did you want to be a racer, a participant, a racer?
No, never.
Never wanted to be a racer?
I've never had the desire to drive a car. To be real honest with you, I don't believe that I have the, what it takes to get in an automobile. I don't have the guts, in other words. It would scare me.
All right, well, I think it scares those of us that do it, too, or we wouldn't be doing
sure
it.
Does. Sure does.
You know, Christine, that is interesting because that's very much how you feel. Nobody likes auto racing better than Chris does. No one. And yet she doesn't have a driver's license, has never driven a car, has no interest in it. I can't talk her into driving a car. but she is the world's #1 spectator. She loves racing.
I'm a great spectator.
All right, so you were attracted to it because there was something about it, about the aesthetics of it, apparently, that drew you towards it. Now, apparently, you must have hooked up with them right away. Then, was it they were looking for somebody to do something, or
the first night that I ever went to the Army, I was so impressed and so enthralled, and so thrilled by what I saw there, that I said that night, I told my parents, I said, this is a sport that I have to get involved in, somehow. I don't know how. But I knew at that point that I would never be a competitor. But I wanted to get involved in racing. I went to the Armory to all the races that winter. The following summer, we started following the midgets at Riverview Speedway, and we went to sprint car races all through Indiana and Ohio. And I got hooked up with a fellow by the name of Ted Wilson that was a racing photographer. And he figured out a way for me to get involved in racing. He sold me a camera and made a photographer out of me. And I started taking pictures, and of course I was getting into the races. Now I shouldn't have been because I was underage. At that point you couldn't get in track if you weren't 21. There I was only 18, 19 years old, but I was getting in because I would go with Ted. And we traveled the sprint car circuits and the midget circuits, and that was the beginning of it. In 1939, I did a lot of photography work at Raceway. In 1940, I became the scorer at Raceway. All of a sudden, they didn't have a scorer, so I didn't know how to score, but I learned very quickly, and I became a scorer. And I was scoring at Raceway then in 40, 41, 42, and then war came along and racing stopped. And after the war, I came back to Raceway Park, and I was the announcer.
So there was an interruption during the war then. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting way that you got into it, because you have, I always presumed you'd have been a disc jockey or something like that, because you've got that announcer voice, and but apparently that other people must have noticed that too. There's a microphone, Wayne.
Well, there was a fellow, back in the early days, the announcer at most of the tracks in this area, all throughout the Middle West, was Ed 20 Grand Steinbach.
Oh, sure.
He lived here in Downers Grove. And I always listened to Ed, and I was enthused over his presentation. And many, many times I said, I would like to have a job announcing the races. I really aimed for that job. I wanted it very badly. But he had all the racetracks sewed up. See, at that point, most of the cars ran a series of tracks, and the same cars ran every night at a different racetrack. So the same crew would follow them around and work the shows. There wasn't room for another person.
Now that you've been in it all these years, looking back, was it all you hoped it would be? Have you enjoyed it?
Oh yes, I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's terrific.
No other way.
That is great.
Many, many times my wife has asked me not only to retire from the job I have, but also to quit the racetrack, quit announcing. And I just haven't done it.
A man is what he does.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, while I was listening to you talk, it reminded me a little bit, and I don't even know if this is close because I don't really know the man well, but there's an announcer named Jan Gabriel. Do you know Jan?
I do, yes.
I know him just enough to nod and say hi to him. But I was working in my shop one night on a race car, and the late night disc jockey had a call-in show, and somebody called in, and I wasn't paying that much attention to it, and the fellow, one of them, mentioned Jan Gabriel, and because I raced at Santa Fe, I started perking my ears up a little bit. And it turns out that apparently Jan Gabriel was involved in a music group of some kind, either playing an instrument or singing or something. I didn't get that part of it, but as they were talking, it was obvious that he was involved in a music group, and somebody said, well, whatever happened to him? And somebody else said, well, he's announcing race cars at this. And then one of the fellows said, it was like 3 on the line, and one of the fellows said that, yeah, he was always like that when he was with us, too. He always loved the racing and never really knew which way he wanted to go with it and everything. I kind of thought he'd probably end up going with the race cars and everything. But to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, but I don't think Jan ever competed either. There must be something.
I don't think it. Now, I really didn't know Jan that well. However, one year, I think it was 1968, he and I shared the announcing duties at Raceway because in that particular year we set up an announcer in the pit area to interview drivers in between races to try to cover up some of the dull periods.
Sure, good idea.
And Jan was doing that part of the show.
All right, yeah, and it just reminded me of you a little bit because he said, when I listened to what he had to say, I said, boy, he does more than announce. He cares about this thing. He is definitely involved in it. Now, what I want to do here now is I'd like to have the girls, I should say my associates. I'd like to have my associates, I can hold this for you, Christine. Show everybody where Raceway Park is. Now, you're going to see a little film that I took down there, and I wanted the signs, the street signs, so people could find it. And I've always found Raceway Park by going to 127th and Ashland.
Right.
And somehow the street signs don't say 127th and Ashland. It says Ashland in
Vermont.
Vermont, yeah.
Right.
So I want to make the point to the audience that for all intents and purposes, it's at 127th and Ashland.
2 blocks south.
But just listen for the engines and then go there. The way we do this is that we start out at O'Hare Field. Continental, what I call Continental Cable Land.
Right.
Starts up in Morton Grove North. Christine, if you can point that out right there. And it's sort of all the collar suburbs around the city, 28 suburbs all the way down to as far south as Dalton. Right there. And takes up most of the suburbs around Chicago. So because of that, I picked O'Hare Field because everybody knows where O'Hare Field is. I know you're going to look at me funny and say, wait a minute, we're from the south side. You can show us where Midway is. Well, I don't know where Midway is, but I know where O'Hare is. Anyway, Christine, now if you start at O'Hare Field, right there. Now just bring your finger down. Now this is if a person wants to take 294, take 294 south. The only tricky part is keep going, stop. Now back up, stop. Right there is the only tricky part is how to get off at 127th because you actually get off at Cicero, isn't it? And it shows a sign saying 127th, and it's a little bit of a pain. It's easy once you know it. But anyway, you can get off at 294 at Cicero, and within a half a block it's 127th, and then take it just straight towards the lake. And when you hit Ashland, open up the car window and listen for the engines. You're within a block of the place, but it's real easy to find and it's real close. Now, Subi, if you could start at the other side, up there again at O'Hare Field, starting at O'Hare, and take your finger up to the Kennedy Expressway, right there. Kennedy Expressway, bring it right down through downtown Chicago, jump right on the Ryan, keep on going. Now, here's where I get lost. Now, what does the sign say for 57? Does it say?
I think it says Memphis.
I think so too, and I avoided it one time. Boy, did I get lost. Okay.
I think it's Memphis. Yeah.
And the other one, and the other direction says
Indiana, I believe.
Something, and I said,
know.
gee, why doesn't it say Raceway?
Well, now there is a sign on 57 that says Raceway Park.
But you have to get to 57 first.
Yeah, you have to get on 57, right?
Right, but anyhow, if people know that, then you jog over jog a little bit west on 57, come straight down, and it's the same thing there. You get off at 127th. It also does say, you're right, there's a little sign, a brown sign that says Raceway Park on it. And it really is real easy to find. And I would say from down, I'm going to tell you what, I live near O'Hare. Christine, if you can put your finger up there in Franklin Park, a little bit south, right there. That's where I live. And on a good night, coming back from Raceway Park, after the traffic and all that, I can get back in 20 minutes. So it's not far at all. And actually during the day, it's 45 minutes, 50 minutes.
Right.
But on a good night, I can get back in 20 minutes without any traffic. All right. Thank you, girls.
You asked me about my driving, and I told you that I was never capable of driving a car in competition, or at least I never tried it. But 3 out of our 4 children have driven.
Is that right?
2 of them are still active, still racing.
Which 2?
The oldest son and the youngest son are still racing.
The one that's my age, the 43-year-old?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
and
well,
what does he race?
See, he, in 1966, actually he started racing in 65, and his mother and I didn't know about it.
Wait a minute, excuse me, the reason the girl's out, the reason her mouth opened is she wasn't born in 1965. Oh, okay.
But secretly, he built his first stock car when he became 21 years of age. And he drove his first Raceway Park. I believe that was in 65. And
unbeknownst to you?
I knew nothing about it. Here, a strange car pulled out on a racetrack, and the name on the door said Emu Smadja. or something like that.
Wayne Adams
And
backwards?
Wayne Adams backwards. And they called me from the pits and they said, "Do you know who that driver is out there?" And I said, "Certainly not." He said, "That's your son." I said, "Wow." But he ran, and
How did you feel about it?
Well, I wasn't pleased. I wasn't really happy because, I'll tell you, through the years, I've seen a lot of my friends badly hurt and
Sure, you bet.
several killed in racing.
You bet. In
And
fact,
it's scary when your own children start racing.
you know, I had much the same experience that your son did. My father was absolutely opposed to racing of any kind. And I was working part-time jobs since I was maybe 12. Remember the kids in Chicago with the three-wheel ice cream carts, pedal jobs?
Right.
Okay, I was doing that from the time I was 12. And you made a pretty good buck at that and saved money, and I started building my first stock car at about 16. I was almost 18 when I took it to O'Hare to race it. And unbeknownst to my parents, they kind of finally knew about the time I was painting it and everything that I'd been doing it. And, you know, I'm going to tell you something. I understood the subject was not, we couldn't even bring it up in the house. I understood it. Over the years, I've thought about it a lot. In fact, I wrote a book about motorsport. And in there, I talk about my dad and the situation because really a lot was lost to us. It's really a shame that we couldn't have had the kind of close relationship. But I understood his position. If he did anything that he felt in his own mind was encouraging me, he'd never forgive himself if something happened.
Yeah.
And if I had a son, I'd be faced with the same problem. As much as I care about motorsport, as much as I believe in it and think it's real important to our society, I also respect it and I understand it. And really, people shouldn't be in it that don't really want to be there and feel that way about it. And don't do it for a lark, because it's not something you do for a lark.
No, it isn't. They love it, and there is no way to change their mind once they get involved in it. Now, Wayne Jr. raced, and in '66, he won the amateur driving championship at Raceway.
Is that right?
He won 9 features that year.
Very impressive.
He went into the late model division the following
Now, this
year.
wasn't a matter of the announcer calling for the checkered flag as soon as his kid got in the lead.
As a matter of fact,
I'm teasing.
I know. I was always afraid that I might lean a little bit in the wrong direction and say something
So you probably went
nice
overboard the
about-
other way a little bit and
Yeah,
make sure you
I
didn't
did.
say, yeah,
I really did.
I'd probably do the same thing, sure.
And then he raced in the late models a couple of years, and a scoring job opened up at Raceway, and I talked to him and I said, get up in the judges' stand, score the races, because he knew how. And that's one way of making a buck and still being involved in racing
Sure.
and enjoy it. So what happened this past year when we changed our late model rules and went back to more of a stock car that costs a lot less money and got rid of the $20,000 racing vehicles, lo and behold, here he came out with a car. He was running an Oldsmobile in the late model division this year. He didn't win anything, but he was there and he was really enjoying it.
And hopefully those that get involved in racing, hopefully they get a real joy out of participation, because there really is a joy in participation. I've said it before, if the only thing a person wants to do is win, boy, are you in the wrong sport. You're going to be, I don't care if you're AJ Foyt, you're going to be in agony most of your life, because like one tiny % of it is getting a checker flag, and the rest of it is working and being challenged by it and growing and testing. And if you don't have a joy out of that part of the participation, you're really in the wrong thing. It's harder work than that.
Right.
Now, I've got to tell you, but we're going to run a tape that I took down at Raceway. And before we do that, Christine is dying to tell this story. I've raced at Raceway Park before.
Oh, good.
And
Sure you want me to tell the story?
I don't think I could.
I don't remember you, Bill.
Well, we were there with the mini champs.
Oh, okay.
And this was about 1979.
All right.
All right, when I was
Yeah.
down there. Go ahead, Christine. The floor is...
Okay, this was the first time that we happened to be at Raceway Park with the mini champ cars. And I was Bill's pit crew, as usual. And he went out on the track, right? He made one big mistake. He didn't take the track seriously. He didn't think that it would be as hard as it was. Consequently, he took 3 laps around the track, spun 6 times. Every time he got to 1 and 2, he would spin. He got to 3 and 4, he would spin. I'm in the pit area, standing where the people who work on the cars stand behind the fence in the pit area, and I'm watching him, right? First 3 times I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He just didn't do that. Finally, about the 4th time, I'm really starting to bust out laughing, but I don't want his friends to see that I'm laughing at him. Finally, I just turned my back to the fence about the 6th time he had spun out, and I just shook my head. I don't know who he is.
You know, it's true. If you go and take a look at Raceway Park, you know, I had just come from, we raced, I don't remember what the deal was, but we had just come from Berlin in Michigan, up by Grand Rapids.
Right.
And we just come from Berlin. You know, it's a big, fast, half-mile, banked half-mile. And I see this little Raceway Park, never been there before, and I took a look at that thing. I said, well, it's going to be like racing around a pitcher's mound, you know? Well, boy, did I get humbled real quickly. I didn't make a single turn in practice, not one. I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I was absolutely stunned by it. And I'm going to tell you something. That is a tough track to drive.
It's tough, and it's really small. It's smaller than a quarter.
And you bet, and you don't ever stop working.
No, there's no straightaway.
There's no straight, and boy, I'll tell you, it really, and I'll tell you something, I developed a real affection for it after a while. What you have to do is don't take a look at the track first, go out there and try it. No, it needs respect. You have to respect the track. In fact, after that happened, I started watching some of the late models, the guys that were really good, and they had some great late models down there. This was, I don't know how it is now, but I haven't been there in a few years, but 79 and 80. And gee, they had a tremendous passing technique.
Yes.
They'd run up high going into the corner, you know what I'm talking about?
Right.
And drive squared up and then drive down under the guy coming out. And so I started watching them, and I learned from it, and then I went out. But I'll tell you, it will make you mindful that this stuff is not as easy as it looks.
I think another type of passing technique that was more or less originated at Raceway Park, I think, was the system where a driver takes another driver down the straightaway at a much greater speed than he wants to go.
Oh, get him onto his rear bumper? And
get on his bumper, take him 10 miles an hour faster than he wants to go, and when he gets to the corner, he can't turn.
You bet.
But the guy behind knows when he's going to put on the brake, and he backs off. When this poor fella's out of control, he slides under him, and he's gone. That was the contact sport at Raceway.
You know, Wayne, a friend of mine, John Olson, who raced stock cars. In fact, I'm sure you remember Gene Marmer.
Yes, I do.
Years ago. Okay, John was one of the kids that was on his pit crew, worked on his pit crew, and later became quite a driver himself, racing the USAC stock cars, and actually got himself a 4th on national television once. So he's quite good. And he was talking about it because he used to go to O'Hare Stadium all the time where I started, and we talked about these things. And nobody takes motorsport more seriously than I do. And I believe in its pristineness and its importance, but I also recognize that there has to be theater there because the economics of the sports depends on audience.
Right.
And at O'Hare Stadium, the normal passing technique was to move up behind somebody and give them a little shot, not spin them out, just enough to move them offline so you could tuck underneath. And it was almost like I guess we'd say a gentleman's agreement that you don't push somebody out of the way, but if somebody's holding you up, you move them over. And there was really never any problem about it. And I assume you're talking about much the same thing at Raceway Park, or except for Raceway, because of the smallness of the track, they could actually make the guy pick up speed down a straightaway.
The fact that O'Hare was a pretty high bank, and Raceway is not really flat, but it's a very
shallow bank.
Very shallow.
Now
less than 10%.
The thing that we were talking about was, isn't it a shame that we can't have that situation again? Because now, as soon as there's contact made, everybody wants to fight.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a real problem. And I just, you know, it's really the same people then as you know, I'm talking 25, 30 years ago. It's really the same people doing racing then. And it's a shame you can't get that kind of a gentlemanly feeling again about what's okay and what's not okay, and make sure we mind those things in order to enhance the entertainment value a little bit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Do you feel that way at all? You ever think about it?
I do, but I feel it's the cost factor because
You can tear up a
back in the early days of stock car racing, when we first started stock cars in 48, 49, in the early 50s, these fellows were racing cars off used car lots.
True.
They buy a car for $500, go out and race. If they hit the wall or wreck the car, tomorrow they buy another one for $500 and run again, because these fellows were making a lot of money. They were running 4, 5, 6 nights a week, making big bucks.
That's a question I wanted to ask you. In fact, this is really quite a treat having you here, somebody that's had as many years around this as you have. And as I mentioned to you on the phone, I'm considered sort of a senior member of the motorsport community, so it makes me feel good to be a kid, you know. Was it ever possible, it has not been as long as I've been in motorsport, was it ever possible for a participant to make a good living at it, make a living, pay his expenses, anything?
They wouldn't make a good living, but I would say that in the 50s, all the way through the 50s, I'm speaking of the drivers that were running at Raceway Park. I would say the top 12 drivers could show a decent profit because the purses at that time were good. The cost of equipment was very low.
Much low, sure.
Very low. They were running stock automobiles, stock suspension, stock frames, Detroit bodies. They could buy them in a junkyard. And like I mentioned, they $500 and they had another car. And they could make $10, $12, $1,500 a week with a $500 car.
You know, I remember when I got into it, and again, I'm talking about 1959, 1960, and I rolled out there with what I'd put together as a kid in high school, you know. And I was in for the shock of my life because the guys that were going fast, I'd walk over and look in their trailers, and at that time there was a new thing, actually having somebody build your engine for you, which was I built my own. And at that time it was Traco Engineering. And I remember very well, a Traco engine, you sent them a Chevrolet engine and they sent it back to you, and for $5,000 you had a barn burner, and you better have 2 of them in the truck and 1 of them in the car. And I'm looking at this, I'm saying, these guys got $15,000 in. I couldn't believe it. And I'm looking at the payout, and I'm saying, gee, to win is $300.
Yeah.
So since I've been in it, it's been economic suicide. And I was just wondering, because you've been in it so long, and apparently you're saying at one time it was better because of the...
Much better.
Oh, all right. Now we're going to take and watch this clip, and I know you haven't seen this yet, this material, and perhaps we can talk about it as we do it. We're going to put it up on the screen over there. And, we've got a man, Jeff, in the control room there. He's right on the money. Thank you, Jeff. What I took this picture of, this is the Raceway Park sign on the outside, and I'm seeing way back in the corner of the parking lot. You guys have got an absolutely incredible amount of parking. Now, do you charge for the parking?
No, parking is free.
Parking is free. Boy, that's all fenced in. That's
35
huge.
acres.
35 acres. Wow, that's a tremendous park. I was so impressed with that. I said, I'm going to take a long pan shot of this so people will believe me, and it's all free. And that's what I'm saying. There's the street sign. It's right at the corner of your place, Ashland Street and Vermont Street.
Right.
But not to be confused that you guys are actually at 127th and Ashland.
Well, we use the address now of 130th and Ashland, and
Let
of course there isn't a 130th Street. But if you're looking for 130th, bound to find it.
I like that. That's good. You guys are also well equipped with bars.
Oh yes, we have several bars, plus
West
the
bar,
portable
East
bars.
I saw that on the track. In fact, you guys are the only track that I know of that has that. Of course, you have the popcorn and the normal concessions for the more family-oriented. And I have the reason I put this in here. This is your concession stand. Naturally, as we shot this tape, everything was closed. The season was over. And this is just the souvenir stand.
They sell souvenirs there. This is where the programs are sold, and photo booth pictures
Here's
of all
my question.
the drivers.
It says photo booth open at intermission only. And I don't know why that gave me pause for thought, but why?
Well, that happened, I believe, because the girl that was working there this year suddenly couldn't get there every night, and the photographer himself would open the photo booth at intermission.
So he's taking pictures during the races and comes out and works the booth. I see.
Now, there's
well, that makes sense then. I should have thought of that.
There's our infield area.
There's the infield area, and
you're looking toward the pits now, toward the east from the judges' stand. And looks like a big racetrack, doesn't it, the way you photographed it? It looks like Indianapolis.
It really does, and as I said, if you're going to take and race this track, you better take it seriously, because it's harder than it looks. Now, how much seating do you have there? How much capacity?
Actually, at the peak periods back in the 50s, we could get 8,000 people into Raceway comfortably.
Using both sides?
Using both sides.
All right.
Yes.
Now, there's one of those portable bars, by the way.
That's right.
Do you have a problem with people congregating around there, other people not being able to see?
Well, they usually line up. They're
not a
pretty much,
problem.
ladies and gentlemen, they stand in line, and the girls just serve them very quickly.
All right.
No big problem.
Now, I was trying to give people a feeling for what it looked like down at the racetrack at the
track level.
At the track level, and also what I think one of the neatest things about Raceway Park is this scoreboard that you guys have got.
That electronic scoreboard is certainly wonderful when it's working properly.
Yeah, it really is, because in a short track it's hard to keep track of the cars getting lapped and everything. It's nice to know who's in first, second, and I'll tell you, as a competitor, I love that thing that you can look up and see your time as you hit the start-finish line and get your time from it.
And the bottom line there, we always kept the number of laps left to run in the race.
All
It'll
right.
show you how many laps were left. If
Instead
it was
of the
a
time.
30-lap race and it said 6, you had 6 laps to go.
Now that's the pit entrance, and that's sort of an awkward deal. I took that picture to show people that sometimes guys don't make it into the pit entrance. The adrenaline is going, and
It's designed that way to stop a car from going into the pits wildly, out of control.
so he has to slow down.
He has to slow down and make a pretty hard right
This,
turn.
I took a picture of this. I want people to see what happens if you go too close to the inside. I got
Those
real
are
familiar
speed
with.
bumps.
Yeah, I got real familiar with those. I'm telling you, speed bumps, they knock the heck. Oh. And of course, you've got the traffic signals all around the racetrack
Right,
to
there's
warn drivers. The yellow comes on or a red
12
comes
of
on to stop.
right.
You've got 12 of them around.
12
the racetrack?
lights.
All right.
You can see a light no matter where you are on the track. You can see the wall has been tested.
Yeah, you do get to touch it occasionally. I can attest to that. Also, I wanted to point out in here the way the corners are numbered. You know, a lot of people we talk to don't really realize that racetrack corners, even a track like that, is actually 4 corners. The way
Right.
we talk about it when we're
Right.
setting up the car. Now, what I've done here is this is the pits. That's going out, and I wanted to take this picture. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Raceway Park facility is all the pits, they're entirely paved.
All paved.
And
right.
that really is a help to the racers. They don't have to crawl around in gravel.
Accommodate a lot of cars.
Yeah, and
A
it's
lot of
quite
cars.
large. It's quite
Very
large.
large.
I know a couple times when we were down there, they actually extended the area into where those trucks are parked,
Right.
and used that for. Of course, the concession stand in the pits is closed too this time of the year. Now the next shot here is I asked one of your fellows down there to take me a ride around the track on his one of those little flatbeds that they use for servicing things.
Mhm.
And what I said to him, I says, well, just take the normal racing line, whatever, want to give people an idea of what it's like to go around Raceway Park. And it actually looks kind of big there, you know.
It does.
I'm telling you, it looked big to me in the car, too, and I just kept spinning out and spinning out. Anyway, so I told your man to do that, but apparently the guy that I got a hold of, he must have been sort of from the Richard Petty school, because on 2, I mean, we were out there running around the wall
Too
out
high,
there.
yeah.
So I said to him, I don't really have the heart for this. Let's move it down inside on the next lap.
Heading into the back straightaway. You know, another unusual thing about Raceway is that the back straightaway is 10 feet narrower than the front straightaway.
Is that right?
And that's one of the reasons the back straightaway wall is more dense than the front. The drivers forget what straightaway they're entering. You barrel into that back straightaway and you're up against a wall in a hurry.
Now, I wanted to ask you too, Wayne. To your knowledge, is Raceway, I was trying to figure this out the other night, is Raceway Park the oldest permanent motorsport facility in the Chicagoland area that's still in existence, still in operation? I'm trying to think it might be older.
Very definitely. Now, I was under the impression that Santa Fe had races many, many years ago, some type of, perhaps an old stock car race or something of that nature. But basically, I think their track was built for horses back in the 1800s or something thereabouts.
All right.
But as far as running stock cars on a weekly basis, I think Santa Fe started sometime in the early 50s.
Right, well, I
And
remember
we
with
were-
motorcycles was, because
Right.
I raced motorcycles, and it was
Right.
1953 that was started.
But Raceway Park was originally constructed in 1938, and it was taken over by the Jenin brothers, Nick and Pete Jenin. They took over the track in they bought it in 46. At the war, the track had been condemned, so to speak, and there were several people involved in liens on the racetrack and that sort of thing. And the Jenin brothers, Nick and Pete, bought the track. They were natives of Blue Island. They bought the track, and they started rebuilding it. And when they opened it in 1947, it was a completely different place from what it was between 38 and 46.
Now, the Jennings, these are the people that own it right now.
Pete Jenin is still the owner.
All right, who's Barry?
His manager that's his son-in-law. Barry Safransky is
All
now
right.
the manager. But Pete still owns the racetrack, and Pete has been actively engaged in the promotion for the past 40 years. It was only this past year that he has kind of slipped into the background and let Barry make some decisions. Nick Jenin got out of it in the 50s.
This was his brother?
They were brothers,
All right.
Nick and Pete. And Nick sold his interest in the track in the 50s, and Pete Jenin acquired the track totally, his own, in 1970. So ever since 1970, it has belonged to Pete Jenin.
All right, because I tried, as you know, I tried to get Barry.
Yeah.
I tried to persuade Barry to come on, and
Yeah.
I couldn't get him to do it. He wouldn't go for it. And
No,
he says, no. He says, you get Wayne up there. He says, Wayne's a good talker, and he says, Wayne's been with this place longer than I have, and he knows
Before he
everything.
was born.
Yeah, he says he knows everything that's going on here. He
Right.
says Wayne is the guy that you want to talk to. Because this is a special opportunity, because you've got a lot of experience, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a little bit prior to World War II, and I'll tell you why I do this. I'm always surprised. This thing about age thing, I emphasize it too much, but it's maybe because it's a period of my life that I'm in, I find it's of particular interest. The other day we went up to Meadowdale. Remember Meadowdale Raceway?
I sure do. I announced up there a couple of
Oh,
times.
did you?
Yeah.
All right.
Stock car race.
We're going to do a program about all the racetracks that were and where are they now and all that. And we have a point to make in this because we think it's real sad. But we went up there to shoot some videotape footage. The person I took with me was 30 years old. He had never heard of Meadowdale Raceway. And this is a car person. Built several Camaros, builds a lot of Chevy engines. He's a car person, not just a non-motorsport person. Had never heard of me. I almost couldn't believe it. I stopped and I said, oh, wait a minute, I'm 43. He's only 30 years old. The place has been closed about 20 years. I guess it's quite possible that he would have never heard. And he was impressed when we were up there shooting. You know, it's almost washed away in so many places.
Right.
And we were shooting a bunch, and he was so impressed with the track. He said, why aren't they using this? He said, I've been by here a million times on that Route 31. He said, I've been by here a million times. He said, I never knew that all this was back here. On the way home, I'm kind of saying, well, you're just not conscious and all this, and we stopped by another guy's garage. There was also a car person involved with motorcycle ice racing. Talked to him for a minute. I'm saying, yeah, John here didn't know about this. He's, what are you talking about? What's that? What's Raceway? This guy's 33, and he never heard it. I'm starting to really feel ancient. So please indulge me. Make me feel young. Prior to World War II, what kind of racing did they do there? Was it stock cars or?
In Meadowdale?
No, at Raceway.
Oh, at Raceway, it was totally midgets.
Totally midgets. No,
Midget race.
And this
Right.
was from what? From 1938?
1938, 39, 40, 41, 42.
Now that you mention it, that'd be a great midget track.
Well, at that particular time, it was dirt, or clay, I should say,
Okay.
because Raceway Park had a reputation at that point of having the finest clay surface of any track in the United States. And that's saying something because Gilmore Stadium in California, perhaps, was the greatest. Raceway, I think, was a close second, according to drivers that drove both tracks.
Sure.
In the early years, Raceway Park was shaped a little bit differently than it was in the picture you just showed. It was actually 4 corners, and it had 4 distinct corners when it was built. And they had a 3x12 wooden guardrail, 3x12, 12 inches high. That was it. These midgets would hit the guardrail and over the top. But it was all midget racing, and it was all midget racing then in 46 when they reopened, and in 47. First stock car race was held there in October of 48. After the midget season ended in 1948, they had a stock car race, a 300-lap stock car race, and these were all cars out of somebody's used car lot.
Guys returning home from the war and...
Well, yeah, and a lot of them were midget drivers that
all right.
wanted to get involved in what appeared to be a new phase of racing.
Okay, but now it's paved now.
You know, it wasn't then. It was still dirt.
All right, still
It
clay
was
track
dirt.
then. All right, and when did you pave it?
Well, there was a reason for the Jenin brothers paving Raceway Park. In order to have the great surface that we had on that track, they had to wet the track down considerably each race day, and I'm sure you've seen that happen at any dirt track.
Oh,
They have
a ton of work,
they work day and night, and then they have to wet that track down very good on race day. What was happening at that point, we were getting fields of 90 to 100 stock cars a night. Now, these cars were cars right off the street. I mean, they had fenders, and they had running boards, and they had everything else that cars had at that point. And the Jenins found out that they were running out of racetrack. The clay was going away, and where it went was each car took about a bushel of clay a night under each fender.
Oh, sure you do. You get that stuff loaded up in there. It's like
Right.
it's like concrete after.
So there was 400 bushels of clay disappearing every race night, and finally Raceway Park was down to bedrock. It was down to foundation that they had put down when the track was originally built. So they decided they better pave the place.
Yeah, sure.
So they paved it in, I think it was 53.
Oh,
paved
it went that long
Yeah.
until it was paved, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, we ran on the dirt. I'll tell you, the stock car racing on the dirt sometimes is a little hairier and a little more exciting than it can be on pavement.
Well,
Because
it also, yeah, people ask me because I've done motorcycle racing and car racing,
Right.
and I've done dirt and ovals and road races, and I like all of them. If somebody wanted me to make a case for any one of them, I could. I love them all, but they're all quite different. Each one is quite a different thing, and particularly midgets. My feeling has always been that they should dirt.
I agree.
The cars
I
have
like
a high
midget
center of
racing.
gravity and all that,
Right.
and they really. But these late model stock car missiles they have now belong on pavement. Those are pavement cars,
They are.
and they're really not. The design or configuration really isn't suitable to pitching them sideways and rooster tailing out of the corners and everything. But it's real exciting when you see cars that are set up for that. I made a call last night because we were fooling with our sign here, or our map, and I'm trying to make it accurate. And I should tell the audience that I'm already on you for giving us some information about tracks that used to exist. I went back as far as my memory went to
Well, I have a lot more to add to your map.
well, I think that's great. I seriously do want the information because, as I say, all the dark spots on there are racetracks that were here and are no longer here. And I talked to Harry Molnar. Am I saying that right?
Harry Molnar.
Molnar.
Ileana Speedway, right?
Yeah, Ileana Speedway.
Yeah.
And I talked to him because when I talked to him earlier this spring and everything, it wasn't for sure whether they were going to open or not. In fact, I
Yes.
wanted to get down there and have a little meeting with him. He says, well, we haven't looked at our insurance yet. Anyhow, so I wanted to call him so that I showed them properly on the map. You know? And he said, oh yeah, we just had our banquet and it went great and all that kind of stuff. And as I got to talk to him, apparently he must be about your age.
Harry's a little older than I am.
Is that right?
Yes, I would give Harry, I'm guessing, but I'd say 75.
Is that right?
Right.
Boy, has he got some stories. We got to talking for
Oh,
a few.
he's an old motorcycle racer from
You're
way
not
back.
kidding. And he got to talking about how he laid out the Ileana track. He did it with his foot shift Harley motorcycle, went out and
Right.
just went around in the circle, and that was the beginnings of the Ileana Speedway. Anyway, I couldn't help but have the thought to come in, because obviously I want to do a show about Ileana too. I says, I've got to see if I can get Harry up here with Wayne Adams. Two of them, and just talk about those times in racing. Believe me, we want to know. We want to know. And gee, it was such a good story. He went on about how he was going to put an airport in there, and did you
He had
know
a
about
landing
that?
strip in there
Yeah,
one time.
Incredible. What a story. So anyhow, hopefully I'll be able to talk you guys into it, hooking up, come on up here. And
Yeah, I've worked a lot of shows for Harry through the years. I used to work at Ileana whenever I had a chance. As a matter of fact, back when I first started announcing, I worked tracks in Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois. I worked all over the Middle West. One summer I announced 123 races
Is that
in a
right?
season. I've announced somewhere close to 3,000 races, I guess.
that's
All types.
that's absolutely amazing.
Raceway Park has run approximately, I would say that since Pete Jenin owned the racetrack in 1947, I think they're right close to 2,600 races that we have run at Raceway.
Boy, I've got a suggestion for you guys. Like you need another suggestion from somebody. You got to put up a sign that this is the oldest motorsport facility in the Chicagoland area.
Well, it is, no
You know
doubt.
what? I mean, what a heritage you guys have. This is silly because I don't know why it flashed in my mind, but there's a place on Milwaukee Avenue called Hasty Tasty. It's a little hot dog stand. It's a little bigger than a little hot dog stand now. I don't know, it always impressed me so much. I went in there. They started, what was it, Christine, 1939 or something? And they've got like a picture of 1939, the guy with the hot dog stand on wheels sitting there, and then one from like 1943 with a little bit more permanent and a little bit more permanent. And I just think that's neat, having the heritage of the thing.
Bill, I would like to ask, what is your own personal favorite type of motorsport?
I would have to say stock car racing. Now, back pre-war days, I would have said midget racing. But to be very honest with you, midgets, after the war, midget racing began to frighten me a little bit. It scared me. I thought they were going too fast and traveling in very heavy traffic, and it really worried me. I got to the point where I was afraid for the drivers, all of whom were my friends.
Oh, sure.
I felt that stock car racing was so much safer. And believe me, I don't think there's anything more exciting than getting 20 or 25 full-size automobiles on a little track like Raceway Park, running 70 miles an hour, and turn them loose and say, fellas, only one man can win. Racing is different from most sports. Most sports, they have team effort. Racing, there can only be one winner.
Well, I know Raceway Park has really got some great car racing. I
They
really
sure
enjoyed
do.
it.
Yeah, she, like I say, she's a world's #1 spectator, and she really, in fact, when we went down there, you might remember this, I kept listening to the cars. They can't allow superchargers. They did supercharge, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I walked in the pits afterwards, and they were all running the gear drive cams. So apparently that was at a time when they had real high buck engines in there. I mean, that's real exotic stuff. But she just loved that sound. I mean, she listened to those things howl, the howling of the straight cut gears.
Shake the ground.
Yeah, it really did. Now I want to just touch on this for a few seconds. This is the serious part of this thing. As you know, obviously you're conscious of it, that racers, the participants, really take a beating financially. Really take a beating financially. And it's not as, at one time it was better, but now it's very expensive to go racing. It's a technical sport, and we ought to expect that. You can't pursue our sport with push-ups and sit-ups. I mean, it takes parts and pieces, and some human being had to make them, and it's a labor-intensive sport. I've always said that no competitor in the sports entertainment marketplace in 1980s America can hope to succeed unless they are covered in network television sports news. The network television is so powerful. I mean, it literally, and I'm wondering whether a fellow your age that I would presume most of your life was without television. And whereas me, I can only just barely remember without television. And I know from my generation and generations after, most people get most of their information from that. And to be part of the public consciousness, you have to be part of that. What I'm getting at is how well do you guys do of getting the Johnny Morrises and the Tim Weigels and the...
We get absolutely nothing. We get no cooperation at all from the major newspapers or from television or radio in the Chicagoland area. The only newspapers that do anything for Raceway Park are a couple of the local papers that are strictly neighborhood papers, and in there we get decent coverage.
My concern, of course, is television, because it's a unique thing in society.
Certainly.
Never before in the history of man have we had something like this, a device that could influence average of 7 hours a day, 240 million people. It's awesomely powerful, awesomely persuasive. And I think that, you know, obviously as you're aware, Raceway Park is in the sports entertainment marketplace. The same as Wrigley Field is, and Soldiers Field, and Comiskey Park. I think we recognize in order for us to generate enough revenue to fund ourselves, even just to break even, we are going to have to penetrate that medium. We have to.
Well, it stands to reason that it's a very effective tool, because almost anyone you see knows the Richard Pettys and the Waltrips and all of the big NASCAR stars' name, because they see on television week in and week out. But the local racetracks are ignored completely.
Yeah, and you may not be that familiar with our work, but a large chunk of our work is in telling the motorsport community, you have a right to access that medium. You don't have to ask them to do you a favor. Those are the public airwaves. They don't belong to the networks, and they don't belong to private companies. They belong to all of us, and we're supposed to share them. I was going to follow up the thing with the question is recognizing how important it is. Do you have any plans to fix it?
P. Jenin at Raceway Park and our public relations individuals through the years have all strived and attempted to get a better cooperation from the media. Regardless, if they would just give you a few paragraphs in the sport pages once in a while, I mean, God knows they give you a whole page of horse race entries and results. And to me, horse racing is not a sport.
It's gambling.
That's gambling.
You bet. It's gambling.
Auto racing has run second to horse racing for many, many years in attendance. But horse racing gets it all for nothing.
Well, I can give you an answer as to why there are no paragraphs in the newspapers about motorsport. If you want to know what's going to be in the newspapers tomorrow, watch television tonight.
That's true.
That's how powerful that medium is. No
That's
kidding.
right.
That's how powerful it is. We're never going to persuade newspapers to take an interest in informing the community of what's going on. The people in their community are watching television.
That's true.
You know, anyway, I just wanted to touch on that for a moment because it's such an important issue and something I talk to all kinds of folks. And one of the things that we have to do in our community, the motorsport community, all of us, is recognize we're all in this together. We have to hope, and I talk to racers about this, I make them crazy. We have to that the promoters get rich. Not just rich, not filthy rich. We have to hope that. And the reason we have to hope that is because if the promoters are getting filthy rich, we'll get more of them, and then they'll have to compete for us. That's economics 101.
Right.
That's how it works. That's how
Right.
the system works. And so hopefully I can persuade the promoters to understand also that the drivers, the participants, can put better race equipment on the racetrack if they're making a few more bucks. And again, hopefully the promoters recognize that we're all in this together. We need each other.
Bill, look where racing has gone without the benefit, without the assistance of the media. Look where it has gone.
I think it's incredible we're still around.
Right.
We really,
But-
it's a survival story in and of itself.
With a little bit of help, auto racing could be far larger than any other sport in the world as far as spectators are concerned.
No question about it. In fact, Formula One auto racing, if you're familiar with Formula One at all, is shown live in 40 countries. Every event has an audience of 1 billion people.
Right.
The only thing that even comes close is when they have the World Cup soccer matches, when they're in the finals for the championship. That's the only thing that comes close to what Formula One does. So clearly, we talk about this, what's wrong, and I'm the first one to step forward and say we always have to make sure that our equipment is sharp, that we look sharp, and that our performance. We have to improve ourselves in every way. But motorsport isn't failing because it's not colorful enough, or because it's not exciting enough, or because it's not dramatic enough. It's failing because we're being cheated out of a fair opportunity to compete for public attention. And if we don't step forward aggressively and firmly and say, stop thief, we want our fair share, we're going to get what others think we ought to have.
Continue to suffer.
Yeah, you bet. Wayne, thanks. This has really been a pleasure for me. Now, you brought some pictures up with you, and we're kind of out of time, and I'm hoping I can get you and Harry up here together and kick around some of the old times. And if I can, I'd like to hold on to these pictures and put credits over them. Take some shots of them and put them at the end and run credits over. If I can hold on to a few of them, or would you?
Oh, I would imagine so.
Is it okay with you?
Most of them are one of a kind, but
Oh, no,
I'll trust you.
I understand. Believe me.
I'll be sure you get them back to later.
Yeah, because I do want the people to see some of this stuff is great. These
I have
pictures.
about 1,000 of them.
Do you really?
Right.
Boy, we've got we really have to do this again. Thank you so much for coming up here. It's been a real treat, and I hope I can get you and Harry to both come up here and talk about the real early days of racing. I'd love to hear more about it. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Bill.
And thank you folks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.